conducted by Professor Ishitani, who was a professor at Hosei University for a number of years, and who was a survivor of the Nagasaki bombings. Unfortunately, this past June, he died as a result of cancer that is directly traceable to the after effects of the bombing. So he is not here with us today, and we had promised him that we would continue to carry on with his work. We did not expect that we would have been doing it quite this way or quite this suddenly. In fact, the night before he was to join us by telephone for the June sessions, the time that he died, it came as a, not a surprise, but as a shock to us. We knew that he was dying. It was something that we hadn't anticipated quite that suddenly. And so one of the things you've received this morning is a paper that is by Professor Ishitani, and it describes some of his experiences and some of his work with peace education. He was a very active member of the peace community here in Japan, and was a member of the Society of Friends as well, and for many, many years was also a tax resistor, which you may not hear of that much in Japan, but there are in fact people who resist paying the tax due to the fact that a certain portion goes to the self-defense force. He told me when I was talking with him about this at one point that he would refuse to pay the tax, but then they would go down to the tax office and make the payment under protest, because the tax office people would be penalized for non-collection. And so they didn't want them to be suffering for the moral stances of the non-payers. But they did go down and make the point. And he said after a number of years, the person at the tax office got to know him fairly well and would say, yes, Professor Ishitani, we agree completely with your feelings, so on and so forth, but please pay. And it's one of those situations. So in his absence today, we have Ikeda sensei, who is a former Fulbrighter, who is a survivor of the atom bombing at Hiroshima, who was for a number of years high school principal in a number of different places, and then finished his career at 14 years as the Yokosuka superintendent of schools in Yokosuka City. And he was 27 at the time of the bombing in Hiroshima. Ishitani sensei was only 13 at the time of the bombing in Nagasaki. So we have people who have had very different perspectives on that as well. And this morning we also have Ishitani-san's daughter, who happens to work at the JFMF office, and she is going to be joining us talking a little bit in the second part of the program about what it is like to deal with being a survivor of what is in fact a problem here in Japan, and that is prejudice against people who have been through the attack or through their relatives. There's this whole concern about what could happen to the next generation, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're not asking her to speak. It's going to be sort of an open session. So during the first part, we're asking Ikeda sensei actually to speak, and he will be starting in a moment. Following that, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. Then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and use of peace education and their applicability now in the current time that we're in, where there are an awful lot of questions about war, peace, and peace education. We'll try and come around to those points. So at this point, I'm going to ask Ikeda sensei to take over, and please go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am from Syracuse, upstate New York. Hi. I'm a graduate of Syracuse University. I majored in English literature and grammar and some linguistics in Hiroshima University. And after the war, we had a severe examination to enter the American universities, but I successfully passed simply because I had a good Harvardian English professor and an Oxford professor too. And they gave me strenuous training in writing English papers, and somewhat I did my best as an English writer. Sometimes I was praised for my ability, and at the end of my student life at the Hiroshima University, I played the part of Macbeth. If 'twere done, when 'tis done, 'twere well, 'twere done quickly. If the assassination could tremor up the consequence, that's all I know. I remember. Well, I was a wounded soldier on the stage of China mainland, and I lost my left eye, and my right leg was fractured, but I survived. When I came back to my college again, the second hardship came in the form by the home of Abel. Well, we are married a year ago, and my firstborn boy came just 20 days before the atomic bomb. So it was lucky for me to be holding him in my arms when she went away for a cake of ice for my refrigerator. When she was just coming back, I heard the sound of B-29 flying over the city. It was a fine day, and many scraps of clouds were floating up above the sky. And I saw the flame of B-29 going away to the south of our city. I wondered why all things were quiet, and we had no air raid warning. The highest warning was released, and everybody was on the ground working or going to work inside and outside of the city. You know, the atomic bomb had 3 factors. One is the explosion light, and then the heat wave, and then the human killing radiation. In addition, the electric wave, magnetic electric wave. And my wife was coming back home just a few years away. The explosion propelled her into the wall of a prison. The reason we lived near the prison was the prison was a safe ground with a heavy and broad walls around it, and I thought first that I can safely escape by the side of this huge wall. It was true, but she was unconscious for a time, and then I was holding my 20-day-old baby in my arms, and I could do nothing. You see, the explosion directly hit my house from the north, and my house was broken in half. But it stood. The northern wall slanting against the southern wall. Everything was lost. I scrambled for my left eye. You see, this is a fourth eye, and I couldn't find it. But it was nothing. I was living, and my child was living too. And after 20 or 30 minutes, she came back. When I saw her, she was in a very bad condition. Half of her face was hit by the heat wave from the north. So her right half was burnt away. And she was walking beside a one-story house, and she received the heat wave from the bomb on her upper body, and her both shoulders and her breasts were all burnt away. When I saw my child, she was seemingly asleep. I couldn't say that he was dead or alive, but when I handed my wife the child, he began to suck the breast. I was relieved, but because he was living. When I saw her breast, I saw that all her nipples were swollen by the heat wave. And when the child began to chew or suck the breast, the skin went away. She was a bare skin, and but she did feed him. Lots of things around us happened. When it was just after breakfast, and many houses bonfires remaining in their kitchens, and in 30 or 40 minutes, the fire began. Well, my house was in the south part of Hiroshima, and Hiroshima is a seaport, and from the south, sea wind always come, and when the explosion came, you see, I thought I was in the hell again, because I had several experiences in the war on China, and once I picked up a screen hand grenade, and I told my soldiers, what was this? And I kicked it in the fire when the explosion came, and all things were white. But when the atomic bomb came, it was all red. So I thought, really, this must be hell. But it was not. In 2 or 3 minutes, the blackout thinned away. I heard the dropping sounds from the hell, from the sky. Well, Hiroshima is favored by the sea wind. So, from the south, this southern wind brought the radiated dust away from the south to the northern part of the city. There, they had the second radiation again in the form of black rain. After receiving black rains, the hair went away, and from teeth comes blood, and in a day or two, they all died. Well, today I have studied not on purpose, but in my natural day by day life, I heard lots of things about the atomic bomb. Well, when I went several times walking around the city, I found the epicenter is near the monument of Hiroshima atomic bomb. There, in front or by the river of the monument, I saw the pavement in a very bad condition, like small waves flinging on the surface. And when I saw that, I thought it must be the epicenter. But the logical epicenter is different. And when the atomic bomb exploded above the epicenter, 580 meters above the level of the it expelled the water of the river in half. Many people wanted water and went into the river, and they found no water at all. Well, in a little while, the water came back, and many lost their lives in the water. The water around near the center is about 2 meters deep, so many couldn't survive. And that's my opinion. No one knows how the water was propelled away from the center, but I believe so. This is my opinion, so no, you can find no evidence. And, well, but you see, the cities and the towns around Hiroshima were helpful in many ways. 8:15 was the explosion time, and near the noon, food were coming or flooding into our city. In many places, I found bundled rice balls in many places. And I had to take care of my wife and my child and many people around me. When I was walking again to my, I put my family near the bank of the river. And that's a safe place with no fire coming. But on the opposite bank, on the side, fire was raging. And the river was in the ebbing tide, and it was shallow, but corpses began to flow down the stream. But we did survive. The first thing after the war was to go to some place where we can live in a normal way. My wife's family lived in Yokosuka near Yokohama, to the south of Tokyo. And it took 2 months to reach my postal letter to arrive at her family. When, after several travels, when we came back to her family in Yokosuka. They said, 2 days ago, my letter came. It was in such a condition. And but in 2 days, they began to feed the babies. It was a very brave act for the city officials to take care of the children in Hiroshima. But they did. I queued twice and was given 2 bottles of, that was illegal maybe, but I did that because she couldn't feed my child again for some days. Well, for 2 months, I tried to save her breast. We did everything in the very poor condition. And, but in 2 months, she somewhat recovered. She could feed my child. And we thought of returning to our father-in-law's house in Yokosuka. There, in the normal condition, the city was not destroyed at all. For 1 night and a half, we went by train from Hiroshima to this place, and I came back. I went to my wife's family. The relatives of her family were anxious to have the wife's property because they thought she was dead. But when they came, they dispersed, and my mother-in-law was wondering why they came. But we thought they were for the eagle to catch the storm meat or the rotten meat in the field. And that was the situation. So many were not in the normal condition. When I went to the city office for my allotment for ration, they told me that I am not entitled to any ration or distributed food because I have no occupation in the city. So I tried to find out my job, and in 2 days I was able to go to a job in Yokohama. There I was, I stayed about 15 years as a teacher of English in a high school. that's what I did in during the war and after the war. Well, and after in 1980, I went to the United States as a atomic bomb victim to tell Americans what we saw and what we did as atomic bomb victims. There I found a lady whose husband was exposed to the radiation in Yokohama and Nagasaki, and her and his legs and hands were both amputated, and when we asked her what did the American government say about her husband's condition, strange to say, we heard that the result, the outcome of the radiation is possible, but it is not necessarily true. And this husband died. We had several letters of her after that, but I found that there are many Americans who suffered from the atomic bomb too. From the sources of monthly magazines, I found that many people are suffering from atomic bomb in America because of the radiation of the atomic bomb explosion site and uranium mines. And also we found that in Russia too, the same thing is said. Well, the first thing that I propose is that you people really don't know, have no experience of the atomic bomb for yourself. But what happened after the explosion, many or the whole world should know. The high temperature of the atomic bomb and the explosion waves and the heat wave and the radiation all can kill people instantly or in a day or two. The center, near the epicenter, lots of people died on the spot. Some were squatting on the stone stairs of a bank, and his shadows were retained. after the explosion, but he is no more. The site of the bridges, there are many bridges in Hiroshima, and when you see the side of the bridges, the northern part fell on the bridge, but the southern part all fell into the river. And once they came to the city, and went away. So the air raid siren was stopped, and no warning. And then just at that time, the NRA came back, and we had an explosion. That was what happened. But you see, when we were free to walk and work in the city, in the open, the American authorities could see what happened to the people in the daily style. And American government built ABCC for the inspection of the atomic bomb, not for healing. And what the people in the city called the ABCC is like a demon. They hate it because it healed nothing. It just examined. Sometimes it taken away the part of the bodies from the family before cremation. Well, that was a real condition. Well, American government thought the atomic bomb is a good explosive with no radiation, but a big explosion with explosive power similar to 120,000 tons of high explosive. That means 1 ton high TNT means the complete destruction of a block. So 10,000 blocks are annihilated. So about 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers are destroyed. In this explosion, the sad part is that very few of our soldiers, all the people died were civilians, You see, when the explosion comes in any part of the city, in any part of the world, explosion destroys innocent civilians, no soldiers, very few soldiers. Well, that's a question. So, American government say nothing of the kind of apology. They negotiated beforehand. And many of you think that this atomic bomb shortened the or made the end of the war. Yeah, it is true, but destruction is okay. It can be rebuilt again, but the human destruction and the human suffering can remain. Even today, we have about 300,000 atomic bomb victims. I'm one. When the American authorities in Yokohama invited her when I was in the States to a party, when they saw her face, half was burnt away, and she was asked, "How do you think?" She answered, "I hate the Americans because you destroyed my face." I as a male, I couldn't understand how deeply she suffered spiritually and physically. She died about 10 years ago, but I remain. I am now 85 years old, so I don't know how long I can stay, but I have lived too long. I am, I have lots of retirement, and physically, I live a very happy life, but I have lots of things in connection with the atomic bomb. I am a president of my city of atomic bomb victims, and also as a soldier, I am the president of Wounded Veterans Association. So I am quite busy. Even today, but I know the limit of my strength is coming to an end. So maybe this may be my last service for you, but I want you to know, to study the outcome of the atomic bomb and the suffering of the people, both in Japan and also in America. And when the Nobel Prize was founded by that scientist, he thought that with the explosion of the dynamite, we shall have no war in future. But things went in the opposite direction. I think having and the making of atomic bombs is okay, but using is quite different. You should know how it kills people in many cruel ways. After the explosion, we had several scenes of cruelty. My friend was walking toward the epicenter during the fire of the atomic bomb. A man with her bowels open and her intestine dangling, and all his body was burnt away. And he came to my friend. He was afraid that this man was coming to him for help. He could do nothing. And fires were going up just on both sides of the street. When he was somewhat desperate, the man turned and went into the fire himself. He must have thought that it was his best way. And in the city, again, when the atomic bomb fell, many houses were collapsed. And under the timber of the house, one girl's mother was oppressed, and the timber was too heavy for her child to remove. Fire was coming. Mother told her, "I'm going to die, go away." And they departed. Well, things like that happened in many ways. That's what happens when the explosion comes. As a soldier, I was a commander of a company of medics. I saw lots of sad sights. Many soldiers died in fighting. And when they saw me, they thought I was a doctor and asked me for a cup of water. I was told not to give these wounded soldiers any water at all. But still, I remember his cry for water. As a human being, we must be careful about the people, not to use atomic bomb. And also, you must know how the victims suffer when you have to use it. I think it was the first time for the Americans to use an atomic bomb. But when you have atomic bombs, such things like dynamite, many want to use it. Many are interested in using it. But there are many things that we must not use. And what we must not use is the atomic bomb. We can have it, we can make it, but you don't, you can't, you shouldn't use it.
Ikeda-sensei, don't.
That's the way.
Okay, we would like to open for questions now. They come from this. We are sticking to our schedule. I know we have Ikeda-sensei talking probably for the rest of the day, but I would like to ask if anyone has questions. We have a microphone that we can hand to people who would like to ask questions.
Thank you very much for sharing. In the United States, the peace movement against building nuclear bombs is organized through many religious, like Catholic Peace Fellowship and groups like that. And I was wondering in Japan, how the peace movement is organized, if there are also religious organizations or how people work together to stop the building of weapons in other countries.
Ikeda-sensei, because of his age, is a little hard of hearing, so he has to have Ishitani-san retransmit what's being said.
At the fundamental inclination for the Japanese is that we must not have atomic bomb, and we shouldn't make one, and we shouldn't let other people bring it to our country. And that was the general opinion of the NP. So we have lots of organizations opposing atomic tactics, communists, liberals too. And our society is also one of. And when I went to the States to tell the American people about the atomic bomb, there are lots of societies I saw. Especially in New York, we had a peace society, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, next question, please.
In the United States, the effects of the atomic bomb have been classified information for quite some time, and not until recently have we've seen photographs of the devastation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And many of the American people truly do not know, it's not in our history books, about the effects of the atomic bomb. And I would like to know, is it appropriate in Japan to ask about that, to talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Because I personally, my parents were opposed to that and thought it was a horrible thing that our country did. And I was raised with that with my parents, but I've always wanted to know how the people were stigmatized, the psychological effects, the physiological effects about it. And I have researched and researched, and not until recently have I found few documents on it in our own country. So I just would like to know, in Japan, is it okay? I would like to know what is appropriate for me to ask and not ask.
In Japan nowadays, we are free to speak out. So I think the American government is somewhat open and broad-minded. So when many of us atomic bomb victims went to the States to tell about our experience. And not at all, they didn't allow us to tell. But whenever we saw the people, especially the regions, they told me that it was their first time to hear something about the atomic bomb. So they told me that we thought differently, but we must think again. It was our strange experience. We thought that you should have known much more things about the atomic bomb, but many don't know the suffering of the American soldiers exposed to the radiation just after the war in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we were I thought that there should be some changes in the United States. So I think some of the government have changed, but it took some time. But I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
In terms of raising the topic with the Japanese, for instance, in homestays and so on, it's not something that would have the emotional negative impact that you might expect. In fact, some of our teachers have been in Hiroshima and at homestays and have talked about it, and people want to have the opportunity to express their feelings. Now, if you get into the debate over whether it was necessary to have the atom bomb or that sort of stuff, that nation one way or the other, it's very easy to talk about. One of the things that Ishitani Sensei and I talked about at one point was if we could get rid of the concept of war crimes and talk instead of war sins. Because we are all sinners, we're not all criminals. And it's something that makes it easier to talk about. Our side did things that we feel bad about, their side did things they should feel bad about, but that's not a matter of I'm right, you're wrong. It's a matter of we've all done bad things. And in that sort of context, it's fairly easy to discuss. Okay, there are other questions here and then there, so we'll start here. Okay.
I want to say thank you also very much. I would like to know, please, what is in the textbooks that the Japanese children at the different... I want to say thank you also very much. I would like to know, please, what is in the textbooks that the Japanese children at the different age levels are given. So what is taught to the Japanese children about this? And I would like to, with permission, just give you a little song. It goes, oh, what a goodly thing for when the people of the earth will learn to live together in peace.
One of the interesting phenomena here in Japan is the textbooks go through a screening process at the ministry. We learn about World War II in school, and she said, well, you know, it's interesting, we never got to that point in the book. And it was a very simple way of avoiding dealing with it. Now, more recently, the textbooks are addressing war issues, but immediately after the war, the simplest solution was we don't talk about it. And it's as if it didn't exist. And so...
Japanese schools, nothing about the directly anti-A-bomb is being to tell them about the atomic bomb. So officially, just the name of the atomic bomb and some little articles can be found in Japanese textbooks, but not minutely taught at school. Not the way. That I think in according to the American suggestion, maybe I don't know.
There is a certain amount of hypocrisy in the Japanese government. In 1972, it was known that American ships, which probably had nuclear weapons, came into port, but since they didn't report that they had them, they were officially not there. Today, it's known that American ships that probably have nuclear weapons pass through the Tsushima Straits into the Japan Sea, which again is something which is in contravention of Japanese law. But again, the government doesn't know that it happened. And so this is one of the things that unfortunately you'll see happening here, and it's with the textbooks and it's also with policy. There was a question over here on the left.
Again, I'd like to say thank you very much for sharing what you did. You said that you feel it's okay to have atomic weapons, but not to use them. Isn't that sort of like giving a child a piece of candy and saying, don't eat it? I'm concerned that humans won't have the strength to avoid using something that they have.
I think that's a kind of the contradiction for, in my opinion. But I know that the American people have it, but you should have it, I think, after completing atomic bomb, in a sense. But for instance, money. When you have a lot of money, I think you should know that how to use it, and also want to use it. But you must be careful how to use it. That's the way. And as a superpower of the world, America is the strongest, I think. So you must have it. You need it, perhaps. But I think that's well, very